Hello legends. So Elevenlabs just released their conversational AI agents. And in this video, I'm going to show you how to plug those agents into Twilio so you can have both inbound and outbound calls. And I'm also going to show you how to trigger outbound calls from make.com and how to pass through custom variables from make.com like customer name and other personal details into your agent. So when you're calling your customer, you can greet them by name and have a very personalized conversation. I'm going to show you all the code in Replit, how to deploy Replit, all the settings you need for Twilio and Elevenlabs. And I'm also going to go over exactly how to authenticate your requests so you can actually pass through custom variables, because that was a little bit difficult to figure out. And I know the major use case for this is going to be to like feed in custom variables as well. So I'm going to show you exactly how that works. I'm going to give you a full run through of the Replit code. And you can download the Replit code from my Gumroad. There'll be a link in the description of this video. But yeah, after you watch this tutorial, I think it'll probably take you like 5-10 minutes to deploy this system for yourself. So it's pretty cool. Hope you stick around. I'm going to first demonstrate an outbound call from make.com, and then I'm going to get right into the code as well. So yeah, buckle up, boys. Let's go. All right, so let's demo an outbound call. So I've got a HTTP module over here, which is actually sending a payload across to my Replit, and this is what is initiating that outbound call. So I've got two variables in this payload. One is the prompt, which is going to be fed into my actual agent. And then one is the number, which is used to actually dial out on my mobile phone. So in other examples where I show this sequence, you can actually put like a Google Sheets module here, and you can plug it into this HTTP module. And you can make it, for example, every time you get a new lead into your Google Sheets, you would just pull out the phone number, the name, other personal details. You would feed them into here using like variables, and then you would basically have an automated system that just sends out calls to customers whenever a new role is added to Google Sheets. But for this example, I'm just going to right click and run this module only. So my phone will start to ring.
Hey Bart, how can I help you today?
Hey, I want to book my car in for a service.
Hey Bart, what kind of car do you have? And when?
Okay, so you can see that it works. We essentially closed the loop over here where we called out from make.com and we fed in a custom prompt. Now, in Elevenlabs, I don't have all the proper configuration of like tool calling or a proper prompt. So you can just quickly see here, I'm just using like the standard hi, I'm Eric and whatever else. So I'm actually not going to run through any of the tool calling or knowledge base stuff here because there'll be a bunch of videos about this. I'm sure they'll be better than my video about this. What I'm really going to be focusing on is obviously this code and how to get the integration between Twilio and Elevenlabs done correctly, and how to pass in custom variables. And I think really the biggest use case of these kinds of like AI calling systems is obviously, yes, inbound calls, but also outbound, like automated outbound calls where you're sending personal information as well. So this is, I really think, the bread and butter of the system, and that's why this video is going to be specifically like about code. It's going to be code heavy. But I do think there is a way where you can actually connect your phone number automatically into here from Twilio. So if you don't want to code anything, you could just go into, I think, this phone number setting. Although I haven't tried out how to actually like initiate outbound calls from here or whatever else. So anyway, for this video, it's going to be, yeah, the coded solution. So over in Replit, the file, when you download the file from my Gumroad, you're not going to have some of these text files. So you don't have to worry about that. You're not going to have this new JS file as well. This is basically all the stuff that like, it took me a while to figure all this stuff out. So I've got a lot of different notes here. The primary files that we're using to run this are index as the main entry point, inbound calls, as you would assume for inbound calls, and then outbound calls for outbound calls. So we just use this file for that make.com outbound call. But then I also have this file here called for the legends. And inside we've got two separate folders. So sorry, this folder for the legends, we've got two folders, inbound and outbound. So basically when you're creating this, let me just get my GitHub open as well because I posted it on my GitHub. Is it here? I've got some diagrams that I think you guys would want to see as well. Yeah, I'm just going to bring this here. So what are we looking at? Okay, so the first thing I want to speak about is when you're actually, when you're interacting with the conversational AI agent, there's two ways that you can communicate with the agent. The first way is you can do so in an unauthenticated way, or you can do so in an authenticated way. So if I go to Elevenlabs and I go to this security panel, basically, if I want to feed in, these are called enable override. This is like that custom prompt, right? So if I want to feed in a prompt from make.com, or if I want to feed in like 10 different variables from make.com and then feed them into my actual agent, I need to enable these settings. So if I turn all this stuff off and I turn this off, for example, and I hit save, this is the most basic way that you can interact with this conversational AI agent. This is the unauthenticated way. And this is basically like public access. Anyone can access your agent and have a conversation with them, which you probably don't want to do. But the stepping stone to get to the code that has the authenticated agent was basically creating this basic version first and then authenticating and then introducing these overrides, which is the custom prompts. Yeah, so over in the GitHub, we've got these two methods. And as you can see with the unauthenticated method, all we can do is just generate a response. Whereas if we do authenticate the API call, then we can pass through custom parameters and then we can generate the response. So for example, if we did this, I couldn't get my make.com to send in customer name and customer details. All we would do is just speak to the standard settings that we have set up on our agent here, right? So maybe for like inbound agents, you might use this system and then you would add like a knowledge base and do some basic tool calling. And that's maybe the use case for this. But really, what we're going to be focusing on is authenticated calls for outbound calling because we want to send those details from make.com. So just to do authenticated calls, you actually have to get like a signed URL, I think it's called. And that enables you to actually pass these custom details and override. So the first setting you have to do when you want to use this specific version of the caller, i.e. The current file for outbound calls, and I think the inbound calls is unauthenticated for now just to show. Nope, get signed URL. So these are both authenticated. So if you want to use this current system, as soon as you download it, you've got to go to Elevenlabs first, and you can just click all these, like it doesn't even matter because you might actually want to override these in the future. Make sure you hit save as well. And with this, we're now able to override the language, the first message, the system prompt, the voice. So there'll be some documentation at the bottom of my GitHub, I think, for signed authenticated requests. It might be this. And there's a specific payload structure that you can follow. So in my code, I just limit it to prompt and first message. I don't do any, I don't change the voice ID, I don't change the language or anything like that as well. But you can just go into the documentation and figure out the rest of the settings you might need, the parameters that you might need for like changing the language or whatever else. So if I just go back here and scroll up to here. So yes, both of the codes that I'm showing you use the authenticated request. So you can pass custom parameters. But the code base does include the unauthenticated version, then the authenticated version, and then yeah, basically with the authenticated version, I made one variant where we don't pass through custom parameters, we just authenticate it for fun. And then I made another code that actually passes through custom parameters. So at a high level, I wanted to explain all that, to explain why there's so many files over here. None of these are actually effectively used right now. When you deploy this, these are just like storage files. But if I open this up a little bit more, so we have inbound normal. So for unauthenticated inbound calls with your agent, so obviously no custom parameters. Then we have inbound authenticated. So for authenticated inbound calls with your agent, but no custom parameters. But like obviously that's the next layer, like the next thing done. So it's authenticated. And then we have custom prompt. So we have authenticated calls with custom prompt. For the inbound, I don't actually, I don't have an API call to get like a pre-call webhook that takes the customer's phone number, searches against a database, and then returns that information and feeds it into the call. I haven't done that bit, but you can do that. You can do that yourself. There's probably other real-time API videos that I've made that actually do that pre-call webhook. So you can just browse my video history and you'll be able to find it. But and I'm going to go through the code in a second. I just want to show you where this specific component is. Yeah, this is where you would feed in the custom prompt for this specific one. So don't worry, it's probably a lot to look at right now. I'm going to go through it later. I just want to explain all the files first, then I'm going to dig into the code. And then from the other side, you can see we have the outbound. So we have outbound normal, so just regular API calls to the public, like to the public endpoint. Then we have authenticated. Then we have authenticated here with a custom prompt. And then we have outbound custom make. And this is the actual file that we have, outbound calls.js. This is the actual file that we're using. And this is making authenticated calls and passing custom parameters from make.com and then setting those parameters in the agent. So this is the first code we'll just basically start off by going over. But yeah, that's what these two files are for. And the reason that I left them all was firstly, one, because like they're slightly different between, like the normal is different than the authenticated because you have to do the authentication process, which is different from this, which because you have to do the custom prompt process as well. So there wasn't a lot of documentation when I was creating this, and maybe in like a week or a month's time, there'll be heaps more documentation, but I thought better to just put out the resources into the universe in case someone comes across it and they just need some different variation. I didn't want to just restrict people to like the most complex code. I wanted to give the basic code as well in case that's a good starting point for different projects. So that's what we have over here, just literally a bank of all different codes that we could use, and they all work. To use them, you would just like copy from here to the bottom and then paste it into the outbound. So if it's an outbound, they go into this file. If it's an inbound, they go into the inbound-calls.js. So at a high level, when we're placing our call or when we're calling the phone number that's associated with this for inbound or outbound calls, we're actually first entering into the index.js file. And in order for us to just have one replit that has both inbound and outbound calls, we have to have this common entry point so that we can basically serve this file as the main entry point for our file. So any inbound or outbound calls first route through here, and then they're pushed out to either outbound JS or the inbound calls JS. So inbound calls JS at a high level. So we're basically pulling in all the environment variables that we need from our environment file over here. I'll dig into that in a second. We then got a helper function to get the authenticated conversation URL. So now we're not just using the public endpoint, we're using the authenticated endpoint. And for this, we just need the Elevenlabs API key to be put into our environment variable. And then we have a pretty standard process to actually connect, like to handle the incoming calls from Twilio. So to basically create that media stream between Twilio and then this Replit server. And then we connect up to Elevenlabs as well. So then we can have like the streaming of audio in and streaming of audio out. So that real-time conversation. So this is just basic configuration for Twilio on how to establish that connection between media stream and our and this Replit code. So when a phone call comes in, it bounces into here, and then from here it bounces into this webhook over here. So actually, when we're in Twilio, I'll show you the settings in a second, but we basically forward the endpoint to this webhook over here. That's why we enter into here, and then we basically start the conversation. We create the call over here. So scrolling down, we've got some configuration over here. And pretty much over here is where we're starting to open up that WebSocket. So we're getting the signed URL, so we can have authenticated requests with our agent. And then as you scroll down over here, there's a lot of comments that you can see. We're opening up the WebSocket. We're then handling messages from both Elevenlabs over here in this function. And then we're handling messages from Twilio in this function over here. So there's a couple of settings in Elevenlabs that we need to change for our agent in order to actually facilitate these conversations. And I think that is in here. So the first is we need to make this TTS output format to ULAW 8000 Hertz. And then I think in advanced as well, user input audio format. So for Twilio, we need to have these both set to 8000. Otherwise the audio format will not work and we won't be able to speak with our agent. So make sure you change, your agent has to be changed to this. And then there's also a warning that comes up that probably right now, maybe in the future won't be here. If you're changing it to this specific 8000 Hertz audio format, that you cannot run your agent in a widget. So you might just need to duplicate your agent and have something totally separate. But going back to the code, it's pretty basic, right? So we're creating the WebSocket, and after we create the WebSocket, we're having the conversation with Elevenlabs, and then we're processing the audio from Elevenlabs and processing the audio from Twilio to basically make it work with each other. So if I go back to my GitHub, I think this is it here. So yeah, when we're creating the phone call, like when the user places the phone call, it goes across to Twilio. Then Twilio, which is the actual Twilio app itself, has to create a connection between our WebSocket. And our WebSocket is just the Replit code. So it creates a WebSocket connection, which is basically always on with our Replit code. And then our Replit code is what plugs in plugs into Elevenlabs. So that's why over here, there's a certain data processing over here, which is the streaming of audio from the user into our Replit code. And then there's a separate processing of audio from our Replit code into Elevenlabs. So as you can imagine, the customer places a call. They might say, hey, what are your open hours? Then over here, we convert that into an audio format for our Replit code. We then send it across to Elevenlabs. Elevenlabs generates the response. So what are your open hours? 9 to 5. It returns the response to our WebSocket, which is the Replit code. Then our Replit code converts it into an audio format that's suitable for Twilio. And then Twilio basically plays it back to the user, and the user gets the response. So that's how this works. So that's why essentially, let me just backspace these. That's why we've got two different portions here. So handling messages from Elevenlabs and then handling messages from Twilio. That's what is basically happening in these two components here. Yeah, so that's pretty much the high level overview of the code. If you want to make some other enhancements to this, then really what you would want to do, okay, so this code is just authenticated, but it doesn't have that initial configuration. So if you wanted to do like a pre-call webhook for your inbound calls, so when someone calls up, you can actually pull the customer's phone number from the TWIML. So from Twilio, you can actually pull the customer's phone number. And if you have like a Google Sheet database that has customer phone number and like previous calls, then you'll be able to make, let's say you run all this in make.com, you'll be able to send a call to make.com that says, here's a customer's phone number, find the row that associates this phone number, pull in those details, and then feed them into your agent. If you wanted to do that, you would have to use this file over here for inbound custom prompt. And once again, it's authenticated. It's the exact same flow as before. So we're sending our call from Twilio into here, and then we're creating that media stream, which is this bit over here. We're creating this connection over here. And this is where we're actually creating the initial prompt and first message. So if I go to the bottom over here, you will remember the format of what I'm just showing you now is similar to this format over here. So this is using the JavaScript SDK or the React SDK. I'm just using, in my code, I'm just using straight JavaScript. But you can see this is the format over here. So you're going to override the agent prompt with this prompt variable or the agent first message with this first message variable. So let me just go back. So what you would realistically do here is probably in this incoming call webhook, before you actually generate the call, like before you create the connection to the media stream, you'd probably have a couple of steps over here to take the incoming, like the phone number from the customer, which the payload from Twilio, when it comes into this webhook, like when it's sent into here, the payload contains the phone number for the user. So the invoking phone number, the phone number that, like if I called it, it would have my number. So I can grab that phone number from the payload from Twilio. Then I can create an outbound API call to, let's say, make.com. I can have a make.com scenario that takes the phone number, returns some information, and then I would pass that information within this TWIML over here. So I'm going to show you in a second for the outbound call how we manage that. But yes, it's possible to take the phone number, do a webhook over here somewhere, and then pass the custom parameter into our actual media stream, and then you can access it over here. So yeah, you can plug this into Google. You can take then this code and actually plug it into, not Google, sorry, into AI, into like ChatGPT, and then plug both codes into ChatGPT and say, hey, help me make this webhook. But once again, I've got real-time API videos out there. I think if you watch the part 3 video, part 3 real-time API, I'll show you how to send the payload from make.com and actually how to do, that might be, yeah, part 1 or 2. Part 1 or 2 actually has pre-call webhooks. But I'll leave that with you guys. And yeah, this is where you would basically ingest it over here. So you could just do prompt, and then instead of saying you are Sophie from Bart's Automotive, you would just have that variable inserted into here directly. So now that we've looked at index.js at a high level, this is the main entry point. We've looked at inbound calls. The structure for outbound calls is very similar as well. The main difference is that we have to actually create the phone call here. So we have to have some other configuration files, other configuration variables from the environment file. So we're going to need the Twilio phone number that we're calling from. So this is basically set up in Twilio. We'll need the Twilio auth token, the Twilio SID as well. So I'll show you the env file in a second and how to plug into Twilio. But as you remember from that first inbound call code, this is the exact same function for authenticating our requests. So it's all the exact same, uses the exact same API key. And so now what we're doing is, when we're first sending this call from make.com, it's going into here, into this outbound call webhook. And from here, we're actually processing it. And then we're sending it across to this outbound call Twiml. So at this stage, let me just backspace this stuff. This part here is actually very similar to this part here. So in outbound call.js, the main thing that we're doing is we're basically taking the variable that we sent from our make.com. So as you remember, if I open this up, we've got prompt variable and a number variable. Over here, we're just basically saying, oh, let's get that prompt variable and let's just save it to prompt, for example. And then we're feeding it through from this webhook into our media stream. So this is what I was talking about before. If you're an inbound call, you want to make a pre-call webhook. This is how you pass that parameter in this Twiml response. So we've got parameter name equals prompt, and this is the prompt value, which is this thing over here. So yeah, for example, if you were to copy this version, this line would just be like an outbound API call to make.com, and then you would generate your, I don't know, first message from your whatever you want to do. And then you would feed it through. It would make its way into this media stream over here, and then you would capture it at one of these steps a little bit later. So over here, I've got the initial configuration files as well. And these configuration files, if I go back to inbound call, where are they? Did I miss them? Wait, sorry, it was in custom prompt. Okay, here it is. So yeah, if you were to use this inbound custom prompt version, so you want to do a pre-call webhook, these configuration files, once again, are the exact same format as in the outbound call. The main thing that we're doing is for the prompt value, we're just accessing those custom parameters that we passed through from here. And we're accessing them over here, and we're saying, okay, you just use that value. So what that means is this entire message here, you're a Bart, you're calling a customer to book a service in for their car. That entire message is ingested into the prompt as an override. And then for first message, you could actually done the same thing. So you could actually go into here and make a new variable called, first message, and it might say, hey Bart, or whatever you want that personalized message to be. And then you could do the exact same thing here. You would just pull out that first message variable. You would add a new line exactly like this, and you would call it first message, and then you would feed it into this first message over here. So instead of me putting a static first message, you can just put your own custom first message. But that's really the main modification you might want to do. So I think really what you would want to run is probably inbound custom -prompt. So you can do a pre-call webhook when someone's calling you up. And then you would just leave this version to run for outbound calls. And then scrolling down, it's the exact same setup as before. So we have send the configuration to Elevenlabs. Yes, cool. Okay, so there's probably less comments over here for how to process things, but basically we're handling the message from Twilio, and then we're handling the message from Elevenlabs. So I'm not sure exactly where it starts, but basically like this section over here is the Elevenlabs processing section. Now I want to show you one more thing. So we were speaking about the make.com. And this is exactly how that setup would be. So we've got make.com, Twilio, WebSocket, which is our Replit code, and then the Elevenlabs Conversational AI agent. So when we're trying to send in custom parameters, once again, we have to use the authenticated version. So we have to do authenticated API call, or we can pass through custom parameters. By the way, if you try add custom parameters with an unauthenticated version, I think you might make the connection for the call, but you won't be using any of the custom parameters. So like if you're ever buckled as to why it's not working, make sure authenticated call. So okay, we're sending the variables from make.com. So we've got trigger outbound call with custom parameters, which is what we did over here. Trigger outbound call with custom parameters. Oops, wrong one. And then we're creating our Twiml, and then we're establishing the connection between Twilio and WebSocket, which is it's called media stream. So that's what we're doing. We're basically instigating Twilio. We're telling Twilio to create a connection, a media stream connection between Twilio and our Replit code. And we're also saying, hey, we've got this custom parameter of prompt, pass it through as well into that media stream so we can access it. Then we're getting the signed URL, and the signed URL is this function over here. So this is the helper function. This is the actual function that we're using to get the signed URL. And then there is I think a try catch over here where we're console, okay, somewhere here. On open, okay, okay, this is where it actually starts. So we're establishing the Elevenlabs connection with the signed URL so we can actually pass through the custom variables. So that's what we're doing over here. We're getting the signed URL, and then we're sending the agent the custom parameters. So must be signed URL first, then custom parameters into the agent, and then we get the response, the personalized conversation, and then we're streaming the response back to Twilio and then speaking to the customer. So once you send it the very first time, you don't have to keep resending it. Like, it's for that session. It's already going to be like that agent's going to have that memory for that session anyway. So Elevenlabs is going to be basically managing all that stuff in the background. And yeah, it's actually very convenient. So going back to the code. Okay, now the environment variables. So there's a bunch of environment variables here. We have the Twilio phone number, which is the outbound phone number. So in Twilio, you have a phone number that you use to place calls. That's what this number is. It's also the same call. It's also the same number that customers will call when they want to speak with your agent. So it's the exact same from my case specifically. So that's the Twilio phone number. We have Twilio auth token and Twilio account SID. And to access those, you have to be in your main homepage or your dashboard, sorry. You've got account SID and auth token, so you just copy these values and then paste them in. So basically that's how you get these two so far. Then Elevenlabs API key and Elevenlabs agent ID. So over in Elevenlabs, you just generate your API key. There'll be a setting somewhere here. But to get the agent ID, you can see the agent ID over here, or it's also in the URL. So this G ending in N. That's what I have over here, G ending in N. So right now we've got all the environment variables, Elevenlabs API key, Twilio, blah, blah, blah. Now we have phone number. So in Twilio, to actually set this up for inbound calls, I'm then going to go to the region where my phone number is hosted. I'm going to go across to active numbers. And now I'm going to go to, this is my phone number that I'm using, so I'm in Australia. Okay, and then over here is the URL that I'm going to be placing. So when customers call this phone number, it actually forwards it to my Replit. So just at a high level, since I'm using this number for both inbound and outbound calls, I would just copy this and I would paste it into here. And this configure, like this value is specifically used for outbound calls. And then I would basically paste it into there. But for inbound calls, let's actually deploy this, and I'm going to show you how to make this live now. So I'm going to hit deploy. I'm going to set up basically using the default settings, everything default. It's going to take a few minutes, so I am going to come back to here when it's done. All right, awesome. So now it's been deployed successfully. So this URL basically gives us access to this Replit server 24/7. So we can have a call at any time of the day, any day of the week. So I'm going to open this up and copy this URL in full, close this, go across to Twilio, and now I want to paste it into, so again, my phone number that I'm using for inbound and outbound calls is this. And right now I have voice configuration. Maybe you've purchased a phone number that actually has, you can scroll down and it will have a voice configuration and an SMS or whatever configuration. Make sure you're setting up the voice configuration for this, because that's what we obviously need. And for my URL, I'm just going to backspace this first section. And you can see I've got incoming -call -11. So I'm going to explain that in a second, but I'm going to paste in that URL that I just copied, the deployed URL from my Replit server. And now I'm going to hit save configuration. So if I go back to Replit now, and if I open up inbound call JS and just scroll up a little bit. So this is the endpoint that I need to target when I'm placing a new phone call, incoming call 11. So you could literally just copy this, and back in Twilio, this is the exact same thing that we need to backspace and paste in. And now when a phone call is placed, just so you can understand what's going on here, it's like it's going to our Replit server in general with this very first URL, and then we're directing it across to that specific code, /incoming call 11. And that's why when we're placing a call, we're literally landing that call, that bundle of information from Twilio right into this pocket over here. And then we're taking that information immediately and creating that media stream, which is that connection. And I know I'm kind of like pushing the point a lot here, but that is, where is it? Yeah, that is this thing that we're connecting to. Okay, so now that we have this set up for inbound calls, I'm going to demonstrate actually calling up this agent. So I have my number saved over here. It's going to be a generic agent. Once again, I didn't actually do any ElevenLabs like configuration in the backend, like in the actual portal to change the agent. So it's probably going to pick up and say, hi, I'm Eric. How can I help you? And I've got another name. It's very confusing. I have definitely not done a good job here, but I'm going to call right now and yeah, we're going to speak with our agent. Did I save this? Yep, same number. And I have there as well. Okay, let me call again.
Hi, I'm Eric. How can I help you today?
Hey Eric, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for asking.
Okay, good. So I don't know what happened that first time when I called. Maybe the connection wasn't established just yet, but I basically called this Twilio phone number, which is, let's say, my inbound customer support phone number. And then I was routed via this URL across to my Replit. And then I made it into this entry point over here. And then we basically created the connection between Elevenlabs and Twilio and our server. And we had that conversation and I could literally, you saw it was, hi, I'm Eric. And I asked a question, I got a response back. So everything is working perfectly fine there. Now, the next thing for us to do is actually to take the same URL, so this same bit here, and now in make.com, I'm going to change this, whoops. I'm going to change this URL. Where is this pointer? I'm going to change this URL. So I'm going to take this and Control V and just make sure it's just one single /. So now this API call is going to point to this deployed version of Replit. And it's going to be accessible 24/7, like I mentioned before, any day, anytime. Now, also to explain this bit over here, so we've got /outbound call. So where is /outbound call? If I go to outboundcall.js, this is the, where is it? Here, this is the entry point. So outbound call, this is where we're landing. So I just want to double check quickly. So outbound authenticated. Maybe some of these have different names. No, outbound call is the exact same. Outbound call is the exact same. Outbound call. I just wanted to be sure all the code uses the exact same names. Outbound call. Okay, so outbound call, it doesn't matter whichever one of these codes that you use, it'll be perfectly fine. It's going to work with it. So yeah, this is the outbound call entry point. Once again, when we're actually using the, when we're triggering make.com, this is where it lands that pocket of information into. Then we're pulling out the customer number, which is if number is there, we're basically taking that phone number and we're triggering the dial out to the customer. This is what we have from, which is the Twilio phone number. Once again, it's my Twilio phone number that we're calling the customer from. The to number is the customer's phone number, which is my mobile phone number. And then we're calling the number to this endpoint over here, which is into this basically over here, so we can create that media stream. That's how this little sequence works. Okay, so now that we have this done, I'm going to right click and run this only, and we'll get a phone call.
Hey Bart, how can I help you today?
All right, thank you. And there you go. So now we've deployed the inbound and outbound caller. So we've actually gone through and deployed this specific Replit server to be live 24/7. This is the main URL that you need to use for inbound and outbound phone calls. We went through the environment variables, how to set them up. We went through Twilio, how to set it up. We went through Elevenlabs, how to set it up as well, which once again, this is super important. You must choose authenticated requests if you want to pass in custom variables, and you must do 8,000 Hertz for output format and for advanced 8,000 Hertz for user input format as well in order to work with Twilio. That's specifically what you need. Other than this, I think everything's covered. Yeah, all the previous code here you don't actually need to use. The main files that you will get in your when you're downloading this from my Gumroad is going to be index, inbound call, and outbound call. And then I also put a sample make.com payload text, but yeah, you guys can basically pause the video here and just see how this payload looks for me. So anyway, I hope this video was useful for you guys. If you want to, if you're a business owner and you want to build this out a little bit more sophisticated for your own workflow, This is probably the most difficult AI caller that I've made, like in terms of like figuring out the code for this. It might have just been me getting blocked in my brain, just not being able to, figure out all that kind of stuff out. But it was a little bit difficult to get running. It took me some time. But yeah, so if you want someone to build this kind of thing out for you, feel free to reach out to me. I'll leave I'll leave my email in the description of this video. All right, guys, hope you enjoy. Hope you have a lot of fun with your inbound and outbound Elevenlabs Conversational AI agent. Please like, subscribe. If you download the code from Gumroad, please leave please donate, leave a tip, whatever. But yeah, all right, GG. See you later.